I'm delighted to be back here at Runways UK to speak to you about airport expansion. I spoke at last year's event, and I'm pleased that so many more people are here today as the debate on aviation capacity reaches its final approach. Local authorities need to play a critical role on the debate of runway capacity. Too often our voice is lost in the haze. The debate has tended to focus on the national and international case for increased capacity at Gatwick and Heathrow airports. I'd like to emphasise the local case for local people. For expansion to be a success, local authorities' involvement is vital because it's local authorities that will speak for all parts of the local communities. Local authorities have a duty to balance the local interests of residents, the business community and the environment with the needs of the economy. And its local authorities at the front line of the airport debate. During recent flight path trials at both airports, it wasn't just airports that received calls. Local councillors too were inundated with questions and complaints. It is councils like Surrey and South East councils in the South East that will be left to deal with the unintended consequences of expansion long after recommendations have been made, policy statements written, and runways have been built. Local authorities are key providers of local infrastructure and services. My council is responsible for roads as the local highway authority. We also provide schools, social care, libraries, to name just a few of our excellent services. Colleagues in our district council are responsible for planning permissions on new housing, with counties and unitaries providing much of the community infrastructure needed to support new development. We therefore have a major stake in this debate and in the infrastructure needed to support expansion. Surrey is in a unique position, with both Heathrow and Gatwick all right on our borders. In fact, we're the only county in the country who has this position. Regardless of where expansion eventually takes place, and note my words very carefully, where it eventually takes place, Surrey will receive the benefits, but will also have to deal with the costs and some of the unintended consequences of what people are talking about today. For a council where economic prosperity is our number one priority, it is important to reflect on the contributions that airports make to Surrey. Surrey itself has an economy worth £35 billion, greater than Leeds and Birmingham combined. Airports are a key part of that economic success. We know that over 13,000 Surrey residents are directly employed by the airports. Many major international companies, such as BP, Canon, ExxonMobil, are based in Surrey because of the unique connectivity to Heathrow and Gatwick. And we estimate that as much as 15% of employment in Surrey is generated by the airports. So Surrey's economic success reflects the outward-looking nature of our economy. Surrey businesses are increasingly international, competing on a global stage. For Surrey, our competitors are not in the UK, but across the world, in China, India, and other fast-emerging economies. We need to balance the needs of this international economy, which thrives on its global connections with the desires of local residents, to have a good quality of life, with good local services and the necessary infrastructure. Our recognition of the economic benefits that airports bring is tempered by the negative impacts they impose on communities around them: noise, pollution, blight, and traffic congestion. We've made clear that whilst recognising the crucial role of airports, expansion at either airport would require the environmental and infrastructure issues to be satisfactorily addressed in advance. We need to think beyond the runway and ensure that these issues are tackled effectively. They are not just nice to have. I make no apologies this morning or this afternoon for repeating what I said at last year's runway event. We must get infrastructure right. And I don't mean the infrastructure around Heathrow Airport for the runways. I mean the other infrastructure. Residents and businesses in South East already suffer from an infrastructure deficit. That deficit has not gone away in the last 12 months. Infrastructure improvements are needed now, before any airport expansion. Failure to adequately address infrastructure deficits around the airports will only serve to undermine the benefits of expansion. Surface access is a significant issue in Surrey and many parts of the South East. Despite the fact that both airports border my county, public transport access to both airports is very poor. Did you know it can take as long to get a train from Guildford to Heathrow as it will to get from London to Leeds with HS2? Little wonder that 80% of residents in Surrey are travelling to the airport by road, when I personally think we should be going by public transport. This means that congestion around both airports is frequent and costly. In fact, we have estimated that the congestion in Surrey is costing the UK economy £550 million every year. I refuse to accept that international businesses and international visitors will want to land at a world-class, state-of-the-art airport, but be transported around and across the South East in overcrowded and slow trains or stuck in traffic jams on our roads. I hope the airports are listening. Expansion will put pressure on local housing, something that local authorities are already struggling with. That means that housing will get more expensive too. The South East is already the most expensive area to live outside London, with several areas in Surrey amongst the most expensive to live in. I can assure you I live in the cheap area. We need affordable housing to help to support the range of jobs that expansion will bring. The schools and the healthcare system are already under pressure from increasing populations. For example, did you know that last year in Surrey we saw 19,000 births, but only 11,000 deaths? Think about it. That's an extra 8,000 people every year. Expansion will add to that pressure. There's a real danger that expansion will see communities without the right balance of housing, schools, hospitals, and worsening conditions. That's the challenge that we as local authorities will need to address. On top of that, we also need to consider the significant environmental concerns. Planes may be getting quieter, but they still will disturb those living and working underneath a flight path several miles from either airport. I've already mentioned the complaints local councils received during the recent flight path trials, but I'm also concerned about air pollution and flooding impacts should either airport expand. How many people in this room, be honest now and put your hands up. If I can have the light so I can see your hands go up. How many people in this room realised in January 2014 that the M25 almost came to a halt? Anybody know that? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've got to tell you a story. Yeah. No, I meant from flooding. Junction 11 was so close to being closed down. And if you think about it, if we don't sort Junction 11 out, it doesn't matter how big your airport is, you'll have no passengers coming up the M25. The impacts I've noted are significant at the national level, but we must be mindful that the impacts of expansion will most certainly be felt in our local communities. It is our role as community leaders to reflect the local concerns, to ensure that they've been understood by both government and heard by the aviation industry. We note the Commission's attempt to measure the quality of life in local areas, but I don't believe that they have gone far enough. They haven't recognised that different communities will be affected in different ways, and in some communities they will suffer a number of different impacts, or a combination of noise, additional traffic, pollution, and a loss of local amenities. As much work as possible needs to be done to understand the nature and scale of these local impacts. On noise, I regret that the Commission has only considered a limited number of indicative flight paths. We need to fully understand that flight paths will be used so that impacts on local residents can be properly addressed. And I'm particularly concerned about the impact on communities that have not previously been affected by noise. Abandoned night blinds is a red line for many. It's critical for my residents and local communities across the southeast. To move beyond noise, more work is also needed on potential flooding impacts and on the air quality. And a thorough understanding is also needed on the indirect impacts associated with the wider economic growth that airport expansion is likely to generate. I'm not prepared as the leader of Surrey County Council for these issues to be negotiated away. I want to make sure that these issues are sorted before a decision is made to build any new runway. I want to make sure that residents are properly compensated, and talks of 25% additional compensation are not at today's prices, but at the price when the house has been having to move out. And I want to make sure that local authorities are not left to pick up the pieces and the financial impacts of runway expansion. So it is vital that local authorities are involved as early as possible in the current debate and that we have a voice in the decision making. Let me make it clear, I am not against airport expansion. Airport expansion could have significant benefits for the residents I represent and the country as a whole. But before we think about landing a single plane on any new tarmac, we have to put the infrastructure in place so that the airport can work properly. We have to make sure that everything is being done to limit the impacts on local communities. And we need assurances that the 70,000 houses that are projected of this project, that the costs for schools and health service are addressed, as the local authorities do not have the financial capacity to fund these. If we're going to get this right, local government has a critical role. Talk to us. Don't ignore us. Trust us to play our part. Thank you. Can I ask a question, ladies and gentlemen? Does anybody know how many 70,000 houses, how many schools we will need to build to take that 70,000 houses? Does anybody know? Okay, I'll tell you, we'll need another 50 primary schools to be built and 6 secondary schools to be built. Who's going to pay for that cost? Is the airport going to pay for it?
Have you asked the Treasury?
Is the government going to pay for it? I asked the aviation minister the other day. I won't say what his answer was.
That's a pity. There is a question here.
Dale Cllr, Chief Executive of the Board of Airline Representatives in the UK. Just a question. Contrary to what a lot of people think, the airlines are really supportive of local transport links into the airports to help move the customs around and also reduce the environmental impacts. Will you and your team be supporting the Southern Rail access into an expanded Heathrow as a way to dramatically change the impact on the local roading, particularly from your county?
Yeah. I mean, there are two things we are very keen on, and that is to expand the link between Heathrow and Waterloo by Staines, which we think is critical because there are a lot of people who arrive at Waterloo, don't necessarily want to get on underground and struggle with bags and things, but if they could get a train from Waterloo to Heathrow, that would be helpful. I also think we need to look at the North Downs line. The North Downs line is a railway line, it's a very slow line, by the way, not because it's on the Downs, but because it goes from Tunbridge in the east all the way around to Surrey to Guildford. And somehow or other, we need to get the Ministry of Transport, which we've been having good conversation with, about electrifying the whole of that line. If we can do that, much more passengers will be able to move through the east and west corridors all the way up to Oxford and down into Kent. I think it's a really good way, because if you're going on an aircraft, why do you want to take your car and leave it to get vandalised at an airport? You know, why not go on the train? I always do.
Okay, we've got another couple of questions. We've got a gentleman here and then one at the back. So in that order, please. First here and then at the back.
Thank you, and thank you, Councillor. I'm Nigel Milton from Heathrow Airport, so I want to give you an immediate response to your speech to say we were listening, we heard what you said, and we very much do want to and will continue to engage with Surrey and other local authorities to make sure that you are very much part of our plans as we develop them. The issue that I want to pick up with on though is the housing, and it's just to clarify with you though that the Airports Commission report, when it refers to 70,000 houses. It talks about that being needed if there was nobody who currently lives in the area was to get one of the new jobs at the airport. Now, while in Surrey I know that you do enjoy a very good levels of employment, there are other areas around the airport which aren't so fortunate. So there is a latent demand. And as you also said in your speech, the population of Surrey is growing. The 8,000 additional in 15, 20 years' time, those people are going to need jobs. So the jobs will come. But I think that I wouldn't want you to be thinking that Surrey has to provide tens of thousands, 100,000 new jobs and houses because of the airport. We will work with you to make sure that the pressure that Surrey is under, that the additional pressure that will come from the airport expansion doesn't provide, it still means that the quality of life in Surrey is as good in the future as it is today.
Thank you for that. And can I just come back to you? Every worker needs a house to live in.
Okay, thank you. And then there's one at the back I'll take. And then...
Just in answer to your question, David, about who will pay for extra schools and homes, my specialism as a chartered surveyor is in property taxation and particularly business rates. Heathrow Airport, if they were to expand and add a third runway and all the additional infrastructure, I estimate that that will bring in an additional £80 million per annum to the government coffers, of which under current business rates retention rules, £40 million will go to the direct benefit of the London Borough of Hillingdon. Admittedly not Surrey, but I'm sure there could be ways of distributing that additional revenue on an annual basis. That's quite a sum to consider.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, but were you aware that Surrey actually contributes £6 billion in income tax to the government, second only to London, so nobody else contributes more, and in return you'd be pleased to know that we actually get the smallest grant in the country. I think there's an interesting analogy there. But I do agree it's really important, if we are going to build houses, where are they going to be? Because it won't just be in Surrey, it will be around Windsor, Maidenhead, Hounslow and areas like that. We have to make sure that there is the housing so that when Heathrow want to employ somebody, that the person can move from wherever they are into a house. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. But the long-term implications, Howard Davis has not recognised. He's thrown this figure in of 70,000 houses over the next 15 years. He hasn't considered the unintended consequences of housing, which is where are you going to get the new doctor surgeries, where are you going to get the health service, where are you going to get the dental services, and where are you going to have schools for children. In Surrey alone, we are now faced with the largest expansion programme we have over the last 10 years. We have currently put in something like 11,000 new school places in the last years at significant cost to the council taxpayer. In the next 5 years, we have to find another 13,000, and that's before my friends in Heathrow start to say we want some more houses. So you can see the pressure we're under. We need to find £239 million additional money from Surrey taxpayers just to pay for the current expansion. And when you take into consideration that people are living much longer now, and one of the issues I'm surprised has not been addressed, Chairman, is that the issue about older people. Now, I'm young at 25, as you can see, but there are a lot of people around who are approaching 70, 80. They will live longer. And a lot of the people around the Surrey, the Maidenhead area, are going to live much longer than most people. And somebody has to address the issue about what about their services? Who's going to be looking after them as they get older and older and different conditions? So there are major issues that we need to account. You cannot just create 70,000 houses and expect everything to fall into place. But the most important thing, I think, Chairman, if I may say, is the infrastructure. We've got to get some new trains going. We've got to sort the M25 out from junction 11 all the way around to junction 16. It needs to be 4-lane, and junction 11, the one that was nearly flooded, was quite close to us closing it down for weeks. That needs to be sorted out because it's too low and we need to raise it. So there are lots of things that we need to look at and to make sure there's the right infrastructure. As I said in my speech, there is no point international travellers coming in at this moment in time to land at the airport, state-of-the-art airport, which I hope it'll be, and then find they're stuck on a train or stuck on the motorway. Defeats the object of expansion, of economic expansion. Get our infrastructure right now and start doing it now, and then when the airports expand, because I think Gatwick may also expand, and if they do, you're going to have to address those issues.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot.